Hello, listeners. This is your host, Laura. Thank you for tuning in. This is part 2 of my conversation with Chief Louisa Libby. If you have not listened to part 1, please go back and do so. This picks up directly where we left off at the end of part 1. And remember, while we don't get graphic, there is a content warning. Alright, so I'll let you keep going wherever you were going.
No, I think that's a lot of who Quindara is. Quindara was a booming town up until I want to say around in the 1960s when they did the big mapping of where the new highway was going to go, like for 635.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it went right through Quindaro because it's a depressed area, and that's pretty much. It wasn't a depressed area until the highway went through. And I don't know, to me, I see that a lot in any of the towns, especially where like they went through and they destroyed basically an entire community that lived there and had a successful town, and they put the highway through there. Well, then after that, Quindaro started kind of going downhill with crime and things. It destroyed that town just because of the infrastructure coming through. They didn't skirt it through another area. They went through the black community, for lack of a better term, which is
actually this
terrible.
is something that I just talked about with Andrew Gustafson from the Johnson County Museum at their redlining exhibit. They have a bit about the creation of the highways and how it destroyed these communities.
Yes. And it's terrible. It's like, if you think of, this is kind of similar, but it's off topic. You think of Standing Rock up north, and they wanted the pipeline to go through. Well, the pipeline
is exactly like that.
Pardon me?
I said, oh yeah, it's exactly like that. You're spot on.
Yeah. So because the town, I forget, the big town there, that the city, they didn't want it to go through there or by there. So what did they do? Oh, we can put it through the reservation. And they had all this support from people to try to fight that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a prophecy, and I forget the chief that said it, was that when the black snake was going to come down and destroy and kind of pollute the waters, then you knew kind of at that it would be kind of the end of times. And that's basically the oil and the pipelines that came down. And they always put them on reservations. They're not going to put them in populated cities because they can just go, well, it was going to up there. It was going through burial grounds and things. And so we're very protective, and we can see the same patterns that have gone on through centuries and millennia, that it's okay to keep taking things that were native. I mean, it's a genocide, basically. The largest genocide ever. 12 million natives have been killed or lost through all this. So to me, as a native growing up, I feel like that we honor our ancestors and we continue on our traditions and our culture, although they have a term up in Canada, it's called white passing, because we don't have the features anymore. But that doesn't mean that our families died off. We're still here, we're still fighting. So everything that they did wasn't for naught. And that's why still very proud and our ancestors live on, and our nations and our tribes and our native communities. And it's just not Wyandot, it's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
We're still here, and they didn't kill us off. And I know some people would think, oh, that was so long ago, get over it. And I've heard that too. And it's like, no, I'm not going to get over it. We're still connected. We still have the stories. We still carry on the traditions and the ceremonies and the language. And we learn. There's people, because we don't want those things to die off. So it takes a lot of work and dedication to keep those things going. But we do. We have in Oklahoma and Anderson, people up in Wyandots. I mean, we're doing a lot right now, especially teaching one another more of the language. We practice the ceremonies. So I'll get into that when you. I think you've got a question about that later on.
We can talk about it now if you like. Actually, yeah, I was kind of wondering, sort of idly considering, because you mentioned, you had the mission up in Ohio, and from what I've read, a lot of people, but not everyone, at the time converted to Methodism. Or no, I didn't say that right. Methodist.
Yes.
And so from what I've read, when you were coming down to Kansas City, like there were still some who followed more traditional non-Christian religious practices. So I was sort of curious if there is a resurgence of that today, or if you sort of just keep it like, this is our tradition. Not that I believe it, like I believe God. This is making sense?
Yes. We've all branched out into whatever faith that we choose. We refer to God as the creator, which is something that in the creeds Christians do. The creator of heaven and earth.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one thing that natives have always, we always practice and believe, is that we are basically just here on the earth and barring, you could say, this earth, the dirt. You need to be respectful, because it was here by the creator, and it gives you life for the plants and nutrients so that you can eat. You've got the water, and you've got Grandmother Moon. All of these things were given by the creator. And when it's in like 1820, there was a gentleman named John Stewart, and he was a black man, and he came across, I think from Virginia. Well, he made his way up into Ohio, and from one story that I heard, he wasn't a slave. He was from the Caribbean or something, but he came across, and he ended up by Ohio, and he ended up by a stream, very sick, and he had this vision where God came and told him that he need to go and create this mission, and convert basically the Native Americans, which wasn't the first time, because when the Jesuits and the French came up in Canada, their thing was to come and convert the natives. Everybody wanted to convert these heathen people.
Right.
But to me, if you look at it, our you want to say our religions, our beliefs kind of paralleled each other. So it's just a different way. We were here to for the betterment. We gave the Creator all the thanks for the gifts of crops and all these other things. I mean, it's similar to what the Christians, but they came and they wanted to convert, and it was bad. Just like the I know I'm kind of jumping around.
No,
just
okay.
Like the Indian boarding schools, those were run by Catholics, religion, and it was horrible, the abuse and the things that they did. So things that they did in the name of religion. So in Ohio, when John Stewart came, he made a mission. He created the mission, and the mission church is still up there. It's beautiful and quaint, just a kind of like a one-room schoolhouse, but it's a church, and they still hold service to this day. And but yes, a lot of people were converted, and there were some that didn't. They still believed in their traditional beliefs. So there were a lot that were converted to Methodist. There were people that probably kept their Catholicism that they had converted through generations.
I guess what I was really curious about was if there are still members of your nation who are like, we've never converted. We have always maintained these traditional beliefs.
No, no, not necessarily. I mean, there's people that still have traditional beliefs, but not in the sense that you're saying. All of that was kind of, but there are still people that I guess you'd say that have a strong connection, not necessarily through Christian ways, but their beliefs are more based into the Creator, and that is their belief system. So yes, I guess in a way you'd say that.
And that's great. I was just, kind of wondering, I guess, like if that played out over the course of your history and into the modern day, if it created a sense of tension or not.
No.
But as you said, you've maintained a connection with your past, with your history, and your traditional beliefs and cultural practices. So whether you believe it or not isn't even important, really.
Yeah, we part of who we are is practicing our culture, our ceremonies. So in that regard, that doesn't mean you have to give up or not believe in your Christian faith or whatever faith that you have, because you're always given reverence to the Creator and the things that He is giving you, but it's just more of the earthly things that you're giving thanks for. We have different celebrations or different ceremonies, one of which comes around, we get together around Labor Day, and we celebrate what's called green corn. And green corn is basically our Thanksgiving, because at the end of the season with the crops, you give thanks. You give thanks when you plant the seeds and ask for. You give thanks for the dirt and the nutrients and the growth of the crops that are going to be able to feed your people. At the end, they would also have a ceremony like we do in September of giving thanks, just similarly as the whites would have given at the end of the harvest. There's other ceremonies and feasts that we have. We've got the Blackberry Feast, and that's the feast where we honor Grandmother Moon and women. So there's a strawberry festival or feast, and we remember those that have gone before. It's important to know the strawberries, we always said the way they would say is when you passed, you walked amongst the strawberries. Well,
that's pretty.
In Wyandot City at the time, well, we have Strawberry Hill. That's kind of where that came from. And there was,
is it really?
Strawberries all the way up through there. But it's those traditions and cultural practices. We have social dances, and those are things that they've had way back. You would get together and you would have, it wasn't a powwow. Powwows are more contemporary, and they're more, a lot of powwows are competitions and things like that. A social dance is just where you get together. They have people, men normally, that have the rattle or the drum, and they sing. And there's different kind of dances and things like that. And you dance at a lot of these festivals. They have the Maple Festival when they tap the trees for the sap. They give thanks for that because that gave nutrients. So everything is more earthly connected, more so.
Yeah. Well, let's swing back around to Kansas. So, we've made it through the Civil War somehow, and now what's going on?
There was a point where there was a bit of division, where government came and offered, okay, we can offer you land down in Oklahoma. So here we go again, if you want to move. And so there was a group, I think like 200, that went down to Oklahoma. Well, of course, when they got there, there's no land. So the Seneca Cayuga took them in, and it was very hard because, at the time you had Confederate monies and things like that. Well, that was worth nothing after the Civil War. There was a lot of hardship down there.
Mm-hmm.
And up here, people were losing their land because here you've got, it's funny because up here they would put you into categories. If you were an orphan or basically incompetent, they would have these different categories. And if you would fit into there, then somebody could come in and kind of be your guardian over the land. And they would get like compensated, so to speak, for taking care of you. And I know that's probably, I didn't word all that correctly, but they would, or insane. They would label you. So there was Abelard Guthrie, and there were other people that would come in and say, okay, you've got, how many people do you have that you're supposedly overseeing their land? Well, then they'd get payment for it. So it's kind of uh, it's really kind of horrible
It sounds
because
horrible. Yeah.
it, there was there wasn't a lot of people that had um, that were generally taking care of people, um, and especially women, because women couldn't own their land and they become a widow.
Hmm.
Well, you could see where a lot of that was taken advantage of, and then there were other people that really um, took it to heart and oversaw or took care of the people like they were supposed to. So that would happen. People, it was extremely tough times back then. I mean, even if you had different times when you had the economy collapse, so people would lose everything. Um, so it wasn't, I think at one time, some of the people from Oklahoma came back up. It's like, we can't help you. I mean, they had nothing. They were,
Yeah,
it
nobody had
was,
anything.
there's
The
a lot
Civil
of
War had just
poor,
ended.
yeah. So the people down in Oklahoma, um, some would say we should have followed. Well, we didn't want to leave our dead. And I mean, that is something that is so close to our heart now. That's why the Huron Cemetery, we'll call it that, but it's now the Wyandot National Burial Ground, um, was so important for us to fight for because that's where our ancestors are. And um,
Uh,
it's just important to us. People just didn't die. They went on to the Creator. It was our responsibility to be sure and take care of and be there with them and take care of their graves. Just like in Ohio when we left, that was in the sermon that was huge. Who's going to put leaves on the and protect the graves in the winter and all this? You still honored your ancestors. There's also sayings, I think, with other nations as well, other tribes, where 7 generations before you, people made decisions, and what happened and decisions that were made will affect the next 7 generations. So, what we do today, um, however we live our lives, make decisions, everything that we do, we need to honor because it affects the next 7 generations to come.
hmm.
Um, so, that's a lot how we, live our lives, and we think of things. You can't just make rash decisions. You really are responsible for um, the present, here and now, taking care of each other, honoring our culture and who we are, and making sure when we make decisions, what we do, that it's going to honor and help the people 7 generations down the road.
I gotta be honest, I don't think the majority of the people of the world have that worldview. And
No, it's more,
it's
to me, it's
beautiful.
more, yeah, it's more, and it just for me, I can only speak for me, but it's now people think more about themselves, and it just in circles. They don't think about what happens in the future. They really don't think, they think that they're made, self made, that people before them and the sacrifices and the decisions that they made carry on through generations. But that is just, I think, in a lot of native cultures, that thought and those beliefs are different. Like you said, do things keep carrying on from before? I think in a lot of tribes, that's what's different.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, let's definitely move on to the burial ground. Before we do that, I have a quick question. Is there another burial ground like similar to the one in Kansas? Is there one in Ohio or in Canada?
Yes. Ohio, Canada, of course, they have several. Um, I talked about different history and sharing. Recently, I learned that across the river from Detroit, where the Anderson Reserve was, um, like in the early 1800s, 1700s, when a lot of the Canadian portions of Wyandot, um, they settled on there before they moved them off of that reservation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are, they always had 4 cemeteries for each direction, like of the area. You had one north, south, east, and west, which I thought was very interesting.
That is
Yes,
interesting.
there are, of course, their burial grounds in Anderton. At Upper Sandusky, where the mission church is, there's a cemetery around that where um, they were buried their dead. And there's people that we know of, names, those type of things, um, that were important, that were more prevalent in society back then, that you could go and recognize. And there's all kinds of there's people buried there. There's also a separate burial where people that didn't believe the Christian way. So I guess in a way, yeah, they did separate them out, and they had the Christian burials around the Methodist mission. Here in Kansas, of course, you have the Wyandot National Burial Ground, which is next to the Kansas City, Kansas Public Library.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the one that was started in 1843 when they could finally bring their dead across. And then story says there are a few Wyandots that are buried in the old Black Cemetery that's down in Quindaro, down the path when I talked about the brewery, and up behind there is a cemetery, and people are still buried there today. It's beautiful. It's up on very high up on a hill, and it's one of the oldest. And they say that because there were some Wyandots that stayed behind in Quindaro, and there's talk of intermarriage and things like that when the original town dispersed. But the Huron Cemetery has been something that has been in, I would say, conflict in the middle of disputes, because would be a very valuable commercial piece of property.
Mm-hmm.
And we were, it's just Indians. It wasn't anybody you could, people for over 150 years have tried to come in and dig up the graves so that they could widen the street. They wanted to put like a tunnel to cut through for a road. There's all kinds of different things that have happened where people have tried to purchase that property. Well, when they put in 7th Street in Minnesota, I mean, there's pictures where they would dig out graves and dump them in a wagon
Hmm.
and take them and dump them on the side of the Missouri River. Um, so that is where you've heard of Lida Connolly.
Yes.
She had Lida, Eliza, Helena, and Sarah. There were four sisters. Sarah died early in life, but the three sisters, they dedicated their lives to that cemetery and to protect it, because that's where their parents were buried. So you hear about them and their story and dedication, um, was that's where the Wyandots and the story connect a lot with the cemetery.
I
Um,
I love this story, especially Lida's part, and she ends up, going putting herself through law school and talking to the Supreme Court. But I was
yes,
really surprised when I was reading some of the details that the the Oklahoma nation was like, yeah, let's sell the land, and they were really pushing for it. But what you were talking about with how much they needed the money, that makes a little bit more sense.
well, Oklahoma um, is just one of the people along the way that saw monetary value in it,
Mm-hmm.
and to us and to Lida, it was where our dead were buried. It was where our families were. So, like you said, Lida, she made a decision to put herself through law school. Her sister Helena, they would take a rowboat or canoe and paddle up to what is Park University. That was a long way, and she put herself through law school. I want to say she was the first Native American woman with the bar in Kansas, but she did end up
That's what I read.
making her petitions and everything to protect that cemetery. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. Well, because she was a woman, she couldn't argue before the Supreme Court, so she had to get attorneys in Washington D.C. to come in and argue her case in front of the Supreme Court. Well, she didn't. She didn't win the case to protect the cemetery. However, they did rule um, without prejudice, which meant that it was kind of open ended, that they could come back at another time and kind of continue the argument, so to speak, to try to protect it. Well, there were so many times through um, the years that even the state of Kansas, yes, you can sell it, no, you can't, back and forth, back and forth. Well, in the early 1900s, even the sisters went up and they built a like a shed on cemetery land, just right there by where their family, their mother and father, was buried. And they took residence in that shed for 2 years. And they had a shotgun, which I've heard never really had any bullets in it. But they would really, they were always there. One of the sisters were always there. And if construction workers or anybody came and tried to disturb any, they challenged them. They would jump down in the hole and protect that land, and you're not going to do this. Well, Helena, the sister, was she would always tell them to put a curse on them if they And even on her tombstone, it says, "Cursed be the villain that molests these graves." So people really got afraid, afraid of Helena because, like the story, there are different stories. That there was one time when um, was it the mayor or somebody was there, and so she put a curse on like his goldfish or something was going to die, and he went home and it was dead, and the other people, there. So she is kind of it's kind of funny the different things that she would put a curse on. One lady, she loved animals. One lady in particular wasn't kind to her dog, and she told her that if she didn't stop, she would die on this day, and she did. So it just kind of gives you pause to think about. Um, it was Helena lived kind of a different life and beliefs, and she really tried um, to protect that cemetery by any means. There was a gentleman that came up, Tom Keffer, I believe his name was, from Oklahoma, and he was doing restoration to the stones. This is just a few years back, because a lot of the stones have been vandalized, the headstones, and destroyed.
Yeah, what did
And
you say his name was?
I think his name was Tom. I think his name is Tom Keffer,
Okay.
or Kiefer. And so he came up and doing a beautiful job of trying to reset stones and lift them up and just take care and try to preserve them for longer. Well, he got to Helena's, and it was sunken in the back, and he would always go in, and it was just him. And he used pulley systems. He used all kinds of things that tools that he had to try to lift up the headstones and level them and all this. And it's worked. When he got to Helena, there was nothing he could do. He tried his truck, his pulley systems, all these different things to lift that stone. And 8 hours later, he's still working on it. And finally, he said, "Helena, I'm not here to hurt or damage or anything the cemetery. I'm here to help." And that stone popped up. And I believe it. You could tell in his face. So it's kind of funny, but she is kind of the protector up there.
Mm-hmm.
If any people would walk through, they always challenged them. And our chief, Judy Manthe, her father was said to have gone through the cemetery or waiting, kind of, I believe, like as a young boy, he was waiting on his father, and he went up through the cemetery, and Lyda and Helena and kind of stopped him, "What's your business here? Who
Mm-hmm.
are you?" And he told him, "I'm here to see my baby brother is buried here." And they just really kind of embraced him and sat and taught him about his heritage, gave him candy. It's just that there were people there that you couldn't trust, that were there to harm.
Yeah.
And to destroy. One thing, and it's really sad, Lyda did all this, dedicated her entire life to the preservation and protection of the cemetery. She died. She came home in the evening, walking home from the library, and a man jumped out from behind the bushes and hit her in the back of her head with a brick, stole her purse to get 20 cents, and she died the next day. And to think all that her whole life, everything that she was dedicated for and the good that she did, and to die like that was just horrible. And they never, they never caught him or anything, but it's just kind of a sad ending to such a great life.
It is. It's
Um,
so unjust. I mean,
yeah,
that would be a terrible way for anyone to die, but like you
yeah.
said, after
And
she has
people,
dedicated her life to this, you would think that she would have deserved or earned to die peacefully in her sleep or something.
yeah, yeah. So it's a lot of times when we give talks or presentations, I mean, we always try to honor the Connolly sisters and everything that they have done, because it was big. It wasn't until um, very late in 1990s, like 1995 or something, that it was finally settled between
Was it that
the
late? I
Wyandots.
thought I had read that it was the 70s or 80s. Or is that when she died? Because I know it was after her.
Oh, Helena. I mean, um, Lida died. I don't know if it was a late. It was in the 40s or something. I don't think it was in the 1950s. Helena died like in the later 1950s,
Okay.
which is, to me, that's not that long ago. I guess if you figure, depending on how old you are, it doesn't seem that far away.
No, it's really not.
Hmm.
So you said, sorry, I interrupted you. You were saying that in the 1990s.
In the 1990s is when the um, disputes and everything kind of got laid to rest about the cemetery, and it was protected um, from any more. It was safe. It wasn't insecure. It would be protected. Not, it's not going to be fussing about, is it going to be sold if not. So there was that finally that understanding and unification again between Oklahoma and Kansas. And now, actually, it's a historical landmark that happened a few years ago, and Oklahoma is taking care of the cemetery and the maintenance and things like that, which is wonderful that they're doing it. But their casino is right next door. The casino, 7th Street Casino, is it says Wyandot Nation. It's the Wyandot Nation, which is, they also formerly the Wyandot Nation of Oklahoma. So they're right there and they can oversee and take care of the cemetery. Oklahoma is um, also the only one of us in the United States that's federally recognized.
Yeah, so that
So,
would be why they get to have the casino. But do you know? Can you explain why that is?
well, they went through and got their federal recognition, and I think it finally came through in the 1970s. So they went through the entire process. So there's a lot of different benefits and things that you get um, if you're federally recognized. Um, like we're not federally recognized, although there's petition and applications and things that are still sitting out there with the BIA. It just so happens that we're not. Anderton is not either, although they're going for their recognition also.
The talk that you gave that I went to back in February when you were talking about this, the thing that I love the most and that has stuck with me is you're like, no, I don't need it. I know who I am.
I know who, yes, and I'm just speaking for myself. Um, I mean, if I'm not speaking for anyone else in the nation, I'm just speaking for myself. That um, the federal recognition, I don't need somebody to tell me who I am. And just because they took our citizenship away, um, that doesn't mean they took away my native roots, my native heritage, and I am native, so I don't need. This sounds harsh. I don't need the white man to come back and tell me that I'm no longer native. They can't take that away, and they can't come back and say, "Okay, well, I'll give you that back." I'll say you're recognized. I don't need that. I don't need that to make me whole. If that comes through, of course, as a tribe, we would get benefits and things like that. But our purpose as the Wyandot Nation of Kansas is really to educate people, to share our culture and who we are and how we got here, and our participation with the community, with the civic responsibilities, that we're still here. We're still participating. We just we weren't just founders of this county. We're still here. And that's really our purpose, is to go out to serve the community, to serve our people, to teach, and to keep sharing who we are, that we're still here, honor our ancestors, honor those that come after us. We're really a people of service. So as far as getting federal recognition, it would be nice because our children may have access to education easier when they go to college or university. There is a piece for healthcare if people should need. But beyond that, we don't have the infrastructure to do any kind of economic development, those kind of things. Like I say, we're more into the sharing who Wyandot, what it means to be Wyandot. How can Wyandots help the community, help the city? We're very active with Quindaro to this day, as far as trying to be stakeholders and trying to protect the old Quindaro town site or township. A few years back, we worked with national parks to try to protect Quindaro.
That would be cool. Did anything come of that?
It kind of stalled out. I think that there are still some people. There's a small. I don't know if you'd call it a task force that's working with the city, the unified government, to try to see what we can do. But like back in the, say in the 1980s, maybe early 90s, there was a company like a waste management that was going to come in, and they wanted to put a dump down there in the old township, and there was a fight to protect that, and that's where the old the concerned citizens of Quindaro came in, and Jesse Hope there at the museum, and led the charge to try to say, no, you can't do that. That's sacred ground. Well, before they could do it, one last step was that they had to have an archaeologist come in and make sure that there wasn't anything there. Well, he did. Um, he found a lot of artifacts and things, so that shut down the whole thing. Thank goodness. So that shut it down and kind of preserved that area.
Mm-hmm.
But the big portion of that area, if you're looking down from the overlook, everything basically to the left of that path is owned by Western University, which was the first Black university west of the Mississippi at one time. And everything to, generally speaking, everything to the right is unified government. So that's where there's all kind of stakeholders, Wyandot, other people are trying to see if they can protect that and share it with the public, interpretive trails, all these things. So that's still kind of going on in the background, I think.
Okay.
But yes, we're still very active with the community and things like I'm on the board of the Old Quindaro Museum. That is one building that desperately needs help to try to get a new roof, and it's had a lot of been through a lot and had damage to the building, but the history and things that was shared there, they hope to be able to revive and refurbish so that museum can keep going. And then I mentioned Luther Smith. He's got his museum of the Underground Railroad. The sad thing is over there, they don't teach anything in their schools about Quindaro. And here you are, it's right there. You're living in it. And it's sad that they don't teach their own history to the kids.
That's why one of the reasons why I started this podcast is because I didn't grow up in KCK or KCMO, but I grew up in nearby Leavenworth. We didn't learn any kind of regional or local history.
Yeah, it's like what I said, the 7 generations before. Why can't you learn the history? That's who you are and how you became the person you are today is because of those before you. And it just seems like it's such a disposable society that it's like, hurry up, get that done. And, people think of the here and now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so important of where you came and where you're going to go.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've been talking for almost 2 hours. I'm sure I wore you out. Do you have anything else that you want to tell us about? If not, then we will sign off.
It doesn't even feel like 2 hours.
I know, it went fast.
I'm sorry. Sometimes I tend to ramble on. And
No, I've loved it.
No, I appreciate that you allowing us to tell our story. That's something that's very important. Instead of having people tell our story, we're grateful for invitations to be able to present, to talk, and to share who we are. And we're very active in the community of Kansas City, Kansas. We're active in sharing between all the bands of the Confederacy. We get together. I mean, we were last time all 4 of us in the Confederacy were together was back in 1650 when we split. But to this day, we have connections and talk with people up in Canada, Anderson, Oklahoma. We have friends. We share our culture days. We share our celebrations. We have women's groups. And so it might have been for 400 years, we're still together. even though we're separated by land. And that's what's really cool. And Canada is also recognizes um, all of us. We get together for different things up there. And
Oh yeah, I
so,
didn't even think about that earlier. So Canada has its own issues with their First Nations. Is the Wyandot Nation in Canada recognized by the Canadian government?
yes, yes,
Okay.
they are. Hmm.
Do you have any upcoming events or maybe another talk that we can go ahead and let the listeners know about?
Um, there's different ones that were. I was invited to a cultural days at one of the elementary schools to share. There's always something um, going on. Like the ethnic festival is going to be coming up, and at the Kansas City, Kansas Community College this year. I think they're going to hold it out at by Sporting KC somewhere out and through there. So
Okay.
or out at the Speedway, something that's going to be outdoors and a lot larger. We participate in that along with I don't know how many other groups. Um, I can't think of anything right now, but we give talks, at the library to different groups. If anyone is out there and they'd like us to come and share, we'd be happy to do so. We have a website, Wyandot.org, and that has a lot of information, and we've just kind of revitalized it. So we have a lot to still upload, but it gives a lot of good history out there. And we spell our name Wyandot. It only has one T.
As opposed to
And
Wyandotte County, which is two T's and an E.
is Yeah. And that's how Oklahoma also spells theirs, two T's and an E. What I heard once, it's like one way is like the French spelling, one way is more of the English spelling. I don't know which is which.
That makes sense.
We kept ours as Wyandotte and Anderton, and further north, there's just one T. When we got here, we were the Wyandot tribe of Indians, and we just kept that. We were incorporated in 1957, I believe, as the Wyandot Nation of Kansas formally. And I believe Oklahoma was 1937, maybe. So there was one other thing I can't think. Oh, in like 1867 is kind of when the split came, where they came back and said, "Hey, do you want to be citizens or not?" Maybe 67 was too far. Maybe it was 61. All these dates run together. But here, they had a meeting and they gave people 2 hours. Well, back then, where are you going to go in 2 hours? And in the 1800s, and try to tell somebody, hey, you need to come and say, did you want to be citizens or not? And so a lot of people were written down as citizens, like my family, and they didn't want that. They wrote a letter and said, we didn't ask for that. We don't want to become citizens. And they were, and that's kind of where the split came between Kansas and Oklahoma, is because they said, well, people in Kansas didn't want to become citizens. They wanted to stay citizens. So that's kind of where the split also came from between Kansas and Oklahoma. It's taken a very long time. There's a lot of healing between the cemetery issues and the fights and everything that came, the kind of the tug of war with that. But Oklahoma and Kansas are very much embracing each other. And we are grateful that Wyandot Nation is taking care of the cemetery. But we get together and see each other a lot. Some of us see each other a lot on Zooms. I mean, we're friends. We're through all of our nations, and that's what speaks volumes. It doesn't matter the distance. That we're here, we all teach one another, we share, we celebrate.
And so I love that for you.
I appreciate you giving us the time, and I hope I didn't ramble back and forth.
No, this was amazing. I appreciate you so much for coming on, and I'm sure that the listeners will enjoy it. If not, then I don't know. They're not very good listeners.
Yeah. Well, as we say in our language, tejame, which means thank you. And I will be here if you need anything further.
Thank you so much. You have a great day.
All right.
Bye, y'all.
You too. Bye-bye.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I enjoyed speaking with Chief Libby. So, going back real quick to the part of the conversation where we were talking about religious beliefs, there seems, I could be wrong here, it seems like there's been like a resurgence of paganism, right? And so I was like, well, is there a similar resurgence of traditional tribal beliefs and religion? But from her answer, I'm like, it's a moot point. My question isn't even a question because it's not a either or. It's not a zero-sum game. It sounds like it doesn't matter if Native Americans follow traditional tribal beliefs and in their heart they're like, this is, what I base my idea of divinity on, versus Christianity or Buddhism or atheism. None of that matters. What matters is preserving the history and the knowledge of these beliefs and maintaining just a connection to them and a connection to their ancestors. So it's the same reason why protecting the cemetery is so important, because they have such a deep connection to their ancestors and to the land, to the earth. And I think that's rather beautiful. Anyway, yeah, I hope you love that. I hope you'll consider becoming a financial supporter of the show if you are able to do so. There are a couple ways to do so. You can subscribe to patreon.com, that's patreon.com/homegrownkc, or redcircle.com/homegrownkc. You can also give one-time donations at Red Circle or at Ko-fi, that's ko-fi.com/homegrownkc. You can give as little or as much as you want. If you become a patron supporter, then you get three things. One, you get an item from the merchandise store valued at $5 or less. You get a shout out on each show, so thank you Bjorn and Joan for your continued support. And you get access to exclusive bonus content, such as this episode. However, as I said at the beginning of this episode, everyone is getting to listen to this. My patron supporters just got to listen to it earlier than everyone else. If you just donate, then you don't get the bonus content and you don't get an item from the merchandise store, but you will get a shout out. And every donation on Ko-fi, 1% will automatically go to fight climate change. If you can't support me monetarily, which is totally cool, I get it, you can still support me by following the show, liking, subscribing to Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Tumblr, Twitter, and YouTube. And especially make sure you rate and review me on either Apple Podcasts or Facebook or wherever it is that you listen to the show. You can visit my website for additional information. That's homegrownkc.wordpress.com. I am still a little bit behind, but there is a lot of new content on there if you haven't been on in a while. And you can subscribe to my newsletter on my website. You'll get an email from me about once a month saying, here's what's going on with the show. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or episode suggestions, you can email me at homegrownkcpodcast@gmail.com or DM me on any of the social networks. For merchandise, go to Zazzle, that's zazzle.com/store/homegrown_KC_store. Thank you goes out to my talented sister-in-law, Sarah McCombs, for the creation of my logo, to the Dear Misses for the use of their song Kansas City as the intro and outro music of the show, to local libraries which enable me to gather my research, and a special thank you to you, all of you listeners, and to Chief Libby. Cheers, y'all.
Seem to shake this feeling, and I can't seem to get you off my mind.